So we're going to go ahead and begin with an agenda, just so you can all have an idea of what we'll be going through today. First, we're going to look at some key points in UX and UI that you should keep in mind when developing your app. And then we'll discuss prototyping basics, and then we'll actually implement those basics into our app. And then finally, we'll be introduced to Flutter and then given a short demo on how to build a dice rolling app in Flutter. So we'll make sure to stop in between for questions if there are any. And if you do have a question and you don't want to forget it, please place it in the Discord channel for this workshop. The presentations will be given by Mary Plana, Jana Wong, and Olivia Palomo. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm Olivia, and I'm a member of the App Development Org. I'm also a communication design major with a concentration in UX. So tonight I'll be going over UX and UI and app development and like why it's important. Before I go too into depth, it's important to know exactly what UX and UI is. So UX explores the user's experiences within a system, and like how does it feel? Is it easy to use? Is there a good flow? And this involves a lot of research to help you understand how your app can be a good experience for your user. And what you as developers should always remember is that the user is always at the center of whatever you're creating. I think that's one of the most important things that you should remember out of this presentation. UI, or user interface, looks at the way the app looks and how animations or interactions are implemented. So I would think of screen layouts, buttons, colors, and typography. This list to the middle or the right are more elements of UX and UI that I won't go into today. But if you have time, I would recommend like researching and looking up what these things are. So now I'm going to go over two UX methods. This first method is user personas. And personas are just like a visual guide to help you understand your target user. I've included this simple template of a persona, but personas vary on the project. So like some information will be more important than others. For example, someone's favorite candy isn't really helpful for developing an app or website for a coffee shop. It's just kind of unnecessary information. So like I said before, it's really good to keep in handy because they remind you who your target users are, and they can also like inspire new ideas along the way. Here are some resources that I've linked down to help you understand what personas are, and these will be linked in Discord. This next method is competitor analysis. And what you can do here is research your top competitors and look at the competitor environment. I would like first create a list for your competitors and then look at what they're each doing well or what they can improve on. So this means actually downloading their app, creating an account if they have that, and then just looking through their app and documenting everything that you find interesting. It's super important. So I would recommend like taking screenshots or notes of things that are they doing well or if they're not doing well in. I've also linked some resources and these will be included in Discord as well. Now I'm going to introduce two UI elements. This first element is about color. Hopefully you all know that some colors only exist on screen. And this is because some colors are just way more saturated than they are in real life or in print. So it's really recommended that you stay away from these true black and white hex colors. And also stay away from placing white text on a black background or black text on a white background. It's just this combo is really harsh on the user's eyes. So super dark grays or slightly darker whites is what UI designers typically use. It's also really helpful to remember that not all colors will look the same depending on the color of the background. So we can see that this yellow in the dark gray background kind of stands out nicely, but the yellow on the light background will kind of strain your eyes and it'll make it difficult to read. So the same thing happens for the blue. You can see it stands out pretty nice on the white, but it's a little difficult to read on the dark screen. This resource right here is really cool. I'd recommend checking it out. It shows you if your color and text combinations meet standard accessibility guidelines. And if they don't, they recommend alternative color combinations or text combinations. And this will be linked in the Discord as well. Now I'm going to go over text in UI, and something to consider is that when you're first designing a screen layout, we just naturally tend to make things a little bit larger than necessary. So more specifically, when you're designing for an app, you have to remember that your users are typically going to be using a mobile or a tablet device. And this means that the screen will be really close to the user's face. So they don't need large text to see something that's right in front of them. So I would recommend sizing slightly lower than you think you should, but you have to remember that there is such thing as text being too small. So you just have to kind of, increase or decrease and try to find that right balance. Color of the text is also something you should consider. So just refer back to the slide that I just previously talked about for that. And to the bottom left, I put some recommended point sizes for a mobile device that you could start off with. I would remember though that every font and typeface is different. So not every point size will look the same for every font. But this list is just a good general average to start with, and you can increase or decrease little by little and just try, to find that balance again, like I said before. This screen to the right is an example of a clunky design. It's not bad design, it's just that everything looks, a little bit too big. It kind of feels like things are bleeding off the screen, and you have to remember that this will be in front of someone's face, so it doesn't need to be as large as it is. So behind this is kind of the redesign of the text being a little bit smaller, and also icon sizes being scaled down to a smaller size. Everything feels just a little bit more balanced, and we've even reduced the scale of these rectangles behind the text to make sure that there isn't too much negative space and that the screen doesn't feel too empty. So I think it'd be fun to kind of quiz yourself on your eye for good UI design. I'm going to give just a couple of seconds for you to either put in the chat which one you think has the most correct design, or just think to yourself which one you think is the better design. Okay, hopefully this one is a little bit obvious, but the correct design is A. And this is because on the right, the red against the white background is just it's just too stark and it'll make things hard to read. And also there is not a consistent type. So this is in Comic Sans, and then this is in Helvetica New. And for screen design, we want everything to be consistent. So this just is not consistent. Again, a couple more seconds. Choose which one you think is the better UI design. And this one, the correct design is B. In A, the text is too light right here where it says 2 hours ago. It's too light against the dark background, and it'll just be difficult for the user to read, and they can miss this, and it's just not user-friendly. Okay, this is going to be our last one. And the correct design for this one is B again. This is because the skip right here in A is not in all caps. And again, keeping on the point of consistency, it's not consistent with the invite friends button that's right above it. So some key points to consider, and that I think it's good for you guys to remember, is that you need to put yourself in the user's shoes as much as possible. You are the designer or you're the developer, but you're not the user. Keeping it simple is also the best way to go. There is like such a thing as going too overboard with your colors and text and animations. Too much of something is not good. It's just not good user experience. And remember that your app is meant to be viewed from different devices and at different dimensions. Even if it's slightly bigger, slightly smaller, those slight changes can make an impact on the user experience. And I think one of the most important things to consider is that your initial UI design will not always work out in development. UX and UI are very iterative, which means that there's a lot of going back and forth between researching, sketching, prototyping, and developing. So it's okay if your initial designs are not your final product. So I'm going to stop here for any questions if there are any in the chat. And Issa, are there any in the chat? If there are none, we can go ahead to Jana, who's going to be showing prototyping basics.
Hello, my name is Jana, and I am also a communication design major, but with a focus in graphic design, and I am ADO's Public Relations Officer. Today, I'll be talking about prototyping basics and showcase how I use those basics to create a Dice app that Mary will later be developing. Okay, so you may be wondering, what is a prototype? And prototypes basically act as a sample of a final product, and they're used for planning and testing designs and interactions before the actual product is created and launched. And this process typically is started after the research and ideation phase of the app, which is also equally as important as the final product. And you want to keep in mind that the prototype consists of the design and an ideal simulation of user interactivity, and is not a functional product. The purpose of prototyping is to limit the expenses during development of the app and test out ideas for designs and interactions before development. And almost 100% of the time, changes will have to be made to facilitate the coding process, which is why prototyping is so important. You don't want to completely develop something and notice all of these errors in design and have to go back and change it, when a lot of it could be hashed out during the prototyping phase. So next, I'll talk about the actual process of prototyping. So the first step in this process is to sketch the design, and these sketches are called low fidelity wireframes. These should be super simple and used to get a general idea of the app layout, kind of like a blueprint. And for this, you'd just be drawing lines where text should be, and like putting boxes where an image or logo should be. So you totally don't have to be good at drawing to do this step. These next steps, steps 2 through 4, are typically done in a prototyping app like Adobe XD or Figma. And the second step is to digitize the sketch, and this is called a mid-fidelity wireframe. These still aren't designed and sort of act as a scaffolding for the final design, and it's literally just putting boxes like from your sketch in pixel boxes in the digital design, and putting placeholder text where your like body copy should be. And you'll see examples of all of these in the later slide. So after you implemented your sketches digitally, the second to last step is high fidelity wireframes. And this is just putting in all of the proper fonts, colors, and images to actually like complete the design of the app. And this is where the app starts to look like a functioning app. The final step is to prototype the app to simulate the functions and interactivity. And this is what is given to developers ultimately. So here are the examples. So this is the low fidelity wireframe, and as you can see, it's very bare bones. It's just to show the general layout of the app. And you can see I just put lines where text would be and like a circle where the logo would eventually be. And this right here is a Dropbox. So this mid-fidelity wireframe, I digitized the sketch, and typically you would use very simple fonts here like Arial or Helvetica to keep it concise and not too busy. And you can use a placeholder text like I did here to mimic where text should be if you don't know what you're going to write in the copy yet. And in between all of these steps, of course, you want to go back and revise things if needed. This last photo here is the high fidelity wireframe. And this is where I go in and put the actual graphic that I wanted here, replacing the box and the placeholder text with actual copy that I wanted. And I also put in the colors and designed the look of the drop-down menu. And here you can see I sort of revised it and added a subheader to give a little more visual hierarchy and make it more balanced, because in the mid-fidelity wireframe, I felt like there was too much negative space here. And the final step is prototyping, and I will show you the process for how I did that in Adobe XD, which is Adobe's prototyping program, and also talk about other options for prototyping apps later on. Let's see. Okay, so this is my prototype. Let me get this window out of here. And here are the mid-fidelity wireframes. And again, I'm using Adobe XD for this. I typically like to keep the mid-fidelity wireframes. I know other people just put their design on top, but I like to see sort of the process of how I changed things. So here is the 3 different welcome screens that I tried out. I tried out different ways of interactivity with buttons and how to get to that initial dice screen. We ultimately end up choosing the drop-down menu as it looked the best and added more opportunity for interactivity. And here is where I created the high fidelity wireframes. I tried out 2 different color palettes, and we went with this yellow one because it looked a bit more welcoming. So most prototyping apps have a design mode versus a prototyping mode. So right now I'm just in the design mode, and you can see there are a bunch of frames here. So when prototyping, basically you have to make each screen separate to sort of simulate like every step in the way. So all of these frames are acting as an animation that would last like 2 seconds. And yeah, so I'll show you how these get prototyped in the prototyping mode here. And so you see these arrows connecting each screen. That is how they are prototyped, basically. So I will show you how it works in the live preview. I can get that here. Okay. So this is the preview of the app. And then you can see where I added the options for interactivity here. So this arrow is on this little drop-down menu button, and then it goes to the next screen here where the drop-down menu actually works. And so I only prototyped the instance of clicking on 2 dice. Typically, if you're prototyping like a full app, you would want to also prototype the instance of clicking 1 or 3 dice, just so everyone knows how to design each one, like when it's sent to developers. And so I clicked 2 here, and you can see on the prototype that I simulated that here. And prototyping also is like super helpful, because if you can see the little thing there that says tap, there's also options of like if you want the user to like drag to the next screen and things like that. So this is where I get to all of those crazy frames here. And this is just simulating the roll animation. So whenever I click this roll button, I prototyped it so it would just transition between those screens to give a sort of like transition effect to the next dice. And then I also prototyped these last screens here to simulate the dice rolling one more time. So I'll go ahead and show you that. And this is the version that I gave to Mary to develop. So after prototyping, I generated a link to share, and there are different options, like if you want to share it to get reviews on just design, for user testing. And in this case, since I was sending it to a developer, I exported it to through development mode. And I will go ahead and show you what that looks like. So this is how this looks if you clicked on the link. This is what Mary would see whenever I sent it to her. It's very helpful. So you can comment things, like you can put a pin and like comment something on like a specific part if you like don't know, like if you need assets or something from the designer, or you can't quite like put that in through coding. So here's development mode. I just clicked on that and it shows all of the colors with their respective hex codes, which is really helpful. And basically everything that you need to develop the app. So it shows padding around images and the font size and color, opacity, things like that. And yeah, so now I will talk about different options for prototyping apps. I have so many windows open, sorry. Okay, so there are quite a few options for prototyping apps, and it's not limited to these choices, but these are what I've seen being used most as a designer and sort of in the industry. Whenever I do like lookups, these are ones that people use most often. So the first one here, Figma, is really nice and collaborative in nature, as you can edit it with others on a browser or through a desktop app. It's free for students if you apply to their education program. Next is Adobe XD, which is what I showed my prototypes through, and it's personally my favorite because to me, it gives the most options when prototyping and like allows for more freedom when animating the prototypes, which is personally my favorite part. Lastly is InVision, which I personally have never used, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's really popular in the industry. It offers a lot of forms of collaboration on projects between developers, designers, and even like marketers. For example, like you can have your mood boards, brainstorming, and prototypes in all of like one place. And now, are there any questions on specifically like prototyping or any concerns that you have?
Yeah, so there's a couple questions in the chat. We missed one question from earlier from Braden, and it's, is there a certain textile we should stay away from?
I think the textiles that people typically use that are kind of hard to read are ones with a lot of contrast in between. So I'm trying to think of like an example here. So like a font on like the Vogue cover, if you know that font, like if you use that as like body copy, like as something small, it'll be really hard to read because of the amount of contrast in between. Typically you want something that could be easy to read at small sizes. And I know this is just like a general rule of thumb, but it's very different because of digital, but typically people sway more towards serif fonts. And I guess like the main like serif font, which I don't recommend using because it's kind of like old, is Times New Roman. And that's like the font with like the little feet at the end. But basically those are easier to read at small sizes. So that is typically used for body copy. And Olivia, do you have any
I was gonna say that exact type. Times New Roman is kind of an outdated font. It's a great typeface, but you usually see that in books, and reading text in books is completely different from reading text on screen. So Times New Roman is kind of like a good idea for a book, but for on screen, something that is easy to read, like Jana was saying. I don't have a list of good ones at the top of my head, but yeah, that's what I have to say for that question. And I think we have a couple more if Isa wants to read those out too.
Oh, I had one more thing on that last one. Isa linked a site on on, I think, the discussion on Discord to a site called Accessible Colors, and that also shows like how like color and like fonts work. So sometimes like if you use a certain color of font and it's too thin, you won't be able to read it against the background. So that just shows like standards if you're like wondering if you're worried about if your typeface or font is readable or not.
The next question is, do teams of designers collaborate on the same storyboard often, or does each designer tend to work on their own stuff?
Typically, you would meet all together in the beginning to sort of like hash out, I don't know, like if someone's like working on a certain page, you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page for the general design. But through these like prototyping apps, most of them are collaborative, so you could all be working on the same project at once. I hope that was the question. Like people work on different things, but together at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the research stage and initial sketching, working collaboratively with other designers is kind of how it should go. And even working with developers, like in ADO, our last meeting, we had to work with our backend team because front end couldn't design or come up with design ideas without consulting backend to see if this would actually work. So beginning process together, and then as you get more detailed, you kind of sort out what kind of jobs each person can do. And yeah.
The next question is this something I can learn to do while working as a teacher?
I definitely think so. There are a lot of resources online. If you're wondering about like the basics of like prototyping and things like that, I honestly would make sure that you kind of have like research on like design basics down, and then get into the prototyping phase, because it's very important to get that sort of foundation so that you know how things work together. So it's not super overwhelming when you get to actually designing it. And yeah, there's a bunch of resources online like YouTube. I definitely watched a bunch of YouTube tutorials to learn XD. And yeah, it's definitely easy. I would also compare it kind of to, I know like PowerPoint or like Google Slides is very simple, but the way in which you like arrange things is sort of simple to PowerPoint, but it's like way more like fleshed out for like prototyping and design. Cool. Are there any other questions?
No, I think that's it. Thank you, Jana.
Awesome. Then I will go ahead and hand it off to Mary, who will show you how she developed my prototype into a functioning app using Flutter.
Hi, my name is Mary Plana, and I'm the secretary for ADO. Today, I'll be showing you the basic information of Flutter and how to apply that to Jana's design. All right? So, what is Flutter? Flutter is a free open source mobile UI framework that's developed by Google. It allows you to create native mobile applications for both iOS and Android with only using one code base. And this works fairly well with Firebase as a backend because they're both developed by Google. And the programming language that Flutter uses is called Dart, and this is fairly easy to learn, especially if you know the basic principles of programming languages. So if you're interested in trying this out yourself after the workshop, I provided a few links for you to use. The supported IDE for Flutter is Android Studio and Visual Studio Code. Right? So as every other programming language out there are pros and cons to Flutter. The biggest advantage to Flutter is its fast development time. Thanks to that, it's great to use for your minimal viable product. I've used this myself in the last 3 hackathons to meet that 24 to 48-hour deadline. And I'm also going to plan to use it again in the future. So because of how the Flutter team developed this UI framework, everyone can easily learn it, especially with all the available resources online. The Flutter team provided great reference documentation that can help you get started. On the other hand, one of the biggest disadvantage that Flutter has is that it's still a new app development framework, which means it's still constantly evolving. And while Flutter is easy to learn, the constant change will mean more upkeep for your code. Another disadvantage that it currently has is that the file size for your application will be larger than Xcode and other comparable frameworks that you might be using for the same type of development. So now that I've gone through the basic information of Flutter, I'm now going to show you a quick demonstration of how you can use this new framework to your advantage. Let me go ahead and share my screen. There you go. Can you guys see my screen okay? Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new Flutter project. It's going to be called Flutter demo. Oh, actually, here we go. So go ahead and click Flutter application, click next. Go. All right, so the project name will be demo, Flutter demo. Then just leave everything as of like that for now. Click next. For this one right here, you can go ahead and check this or leave it unchecked. It doesn't really matter for now. And then click finish. All right, so this is the page that will show you when you first create your Flutter project. Let me go ahead and run this. So that way we can see what the Flutter team has provided for us. And then you see here that there are a bunch of commented text. This will explain some of the features that are in this program. So building the project will take a little bit, but after that, we should be ready to go. All right. Okay. So this is the application that Flutter provided for us. It's very simple. So what it does is that whenever you click this button down here, it's going to change the number in the middle. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over some of the code for this. So as every other programming language out there, main is the starting point of your application. And we see here that main has a function called run app, which will run my app, which is down over here. So my app is what you call a widget, and you can think of a widget as a class. So if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, hopefully this is easy to understand. So let's see here. Just like what the comment said, this widget is the root of your application. So with how Flutter is built, you can think of it as a tree of widgets. Okay, and then we see here that we have a widget build, build context. You don't really have to worry about what it means yet. What this basically does is that it builds everything that's being shown here in this screen. And it will return what a widget called material app. This is very common to many Flutter applications that it will do the theme and also the navigation for your whole app. So we see here that it has a property called home, and it's going to take us to homepage, which is what is shown in this application. So let's go ahead and go down to that class. Go. So we see we have a variable counter, and we see that there's a function called increment counter, which also has a function inside called set state. And what set state basically do is that whenever it sends a change within the app, like for example, whenever we click on this button, it will destroy the whole build or the number itself and rebuild it again to update the counter, the variable. And then let's go ahead and go down here. All right, so we see the same thing again, widget build, and this will return a scaffold. You can think of this as, again, the whole screen, and we see that the scaffold has a property called app bar, and the app bar widget takes in a text widget that displays title, which is right over here. And we see in the scaffold's body that there's a center widget, and the center widget is basically a layout widget, which also takes in a single child, and as the comment says, it positions it in the middle of the parent, which is shown right over here. And inside that center, it has a child called column, and column is another layout widget, and as the name states, it arranges a list of children vertically. So let's go ahead and delve deeper into column, and we see that column has two children. It's both a text widget, and this is the you have pushed the button this many times, and another where it has that counter variable. And this is how the Flutter team does string interpolation. And right over here, we have a button, and that's basically the circle button down here. It's called a floating action button. And then on press, which takes in a function, it will increment counter, which is the block of code that we saw right over here. Okay, let's go ahead and delve into that. And you see here that the floating action button takes in a child widget called icon, and then that's how it displays the plus button right over here. Right, so another thing to take note of before we continue on to the demonstration, the dice demonstration. So there's this button, two buttons down over here. This one, it has a lightning symbol. This is called the hot reload. So what this basically does is that whenever you change something in the project, like for example, let's change the color of the app bar or the whole project itself here. So let's go ahead and change this to green, for example. There we go. Let's go ahead and hit hot reload. And the keyboard shortcut for this is Command Save. There you go. So now our application, the color has changed to green. But you notice that our data is still there. So it's still 18, and if we change this to, for example, red, you see that 22 is still there. So that brings us to another thing right over here. This one is called hot restart. And what this basically does is that it destroys everything in the application and then rebuild it from the beginning. So if we go ahead and press this, you see that our counter went back to 0. So those are the few things that you want to keep in mind whenever we go through the Flutter demo for the Dice app. Right, so let me go ahead and quit this one, and let's go to the Dice demo. There you go. All right, so here, let's go and start to main.dart. So as you can see, my main.dart is completely different compared to well, almost different compared to the previous project that I just showed. It's a little bit cleaner, less cluttered. We only have the class called myApp. And we see that we have main and material app, which the home will be the homepage. So let's go ahead and go to homepage. There you go. All right. So let's go ahead and build this application. This will also take 30 seconds. So let's go ahead and wait for a little bit. All right. So the thing with Flutter and Android Studio and the communication with Xcode is that sometimes this will happen. So a quick fix that almost work almost all the time, but not all the time, is what you can do is you can go under Tools, Flutter, and do a Flutter clean. So hopefully that will clear the error for us. And let's go ahead and build it again. Right. There you go. It took 24 seconds. There you go. So Flutter clean works, but not all the time. All right. So I've already prepared. Okay, let's just go ahead and get dependencies. Okay, here you go. So I prepared like almost all of Jaina's design, but let's go ahead and try to recreate that dice above welcome. So let's see. So we need an image called image asset. And you see here, just go walk you through the code. We have what you call a stateful widget. And what that does is that will enable you to use set state. And that's, as I explained earlier, that set state, if they detect a change in the app, they will completely destroy that widget and then rebuild it again to show the user the updated version. Then we see that we have the widget column here, and that makes sense because we want to display these widgets vertically. So let's go ahead and create the what you call an image asset. So this will display one of the dice picture that is imported right over here. So let me go ahead and show you what it looks like. So there's 2, 3, 6, and so on. Let me go ahead and close this out. There you go. So let's go ahead and do image asset. And what you put here is the file path. Okay, so let's do images / let's do 5.png. And then let's go ahead and do a hot reload, which is this symbol right up here, the lightning symbol, or you can also do command save. Right, and as you see here, we got the images right over here. Okay, so another thing to take note of is the way you import images, fonts, assets, whatever, what you have to do is go under pubspec.yaml. And you can think of pubspec.yaml as a configuration file. So you see here, this is how I imported everything for images. And then this is how I imported the font that Jaina used for her design, which is Poppins. And you can get these fonts from, for example, google.fonts.com. I believe that's the website for it. So let's go ahead and close this down. Go back to homepage.dart. All right, so in her design, we see that there's a border around this image. So let me go ahead and wrap this in a container called widget. And what you can do is you can, on the computer, or at least on the Mac, you can do Option, Enter. And there are a few widgets here that are commonly used where you can wrap your other widget in. So let's go ahead and do container and put commas here. Another thing to take note of is that the difference between Dart and also the other programming language is that you have to get used to using commas a lot instead of semicolons. So let's go ahead and do decoration, box decoration, and the color. We see that it's blue. So I type in K and then blue. You see that I have a few options here, which is blue, dark blue, and light blue. And you also see that those are from a file called constants.dart. So let's go ahead and head there. So I've already predefined all of these constants that we can use for the demo. So that way we can just save time. And then we see here, I've defined the hex code for the UI colors that we're going to be using today. So what we're going to be using is called light blue for the border. Right, so actually the color will be the background. So let's go ahead and do light yellow. Let's go ahead and do the border radius to be circular because we saw in Jaina's design that it's going to be a rounded corners, the circular, and we see that the radius is going to be 13. All right, let's go ahead and do command save. Okay, so you see that there's the color here and the edges are already rounded, but we don't have that border yet. So let's go ahead and create that. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna do border.all. And we're going to do, the color is light blue. Change the property. It's okay, light blue. And the width will be 4. There you go. So we're getting closer there. All right, so another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that whenever you want to name the constants, a naming convention that I learned when I was following the tutorial online is that to put K in front of it. So that way, like I showed earlier, whenever you do K blue, you can see the blue constants and different shades of blue in the constants .dart. All right, so in her design, the dice looks a little bit different. So let's go ahead and rotate this by using a widget called transform. Do .rotate, and let's make the angle. Oops. Okay. Let's go ahead and make that to math. Dot pi divided by 4. We go. Okay, and now we see that there's an error. That's because we need to import something up here that will let us use mathpi. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's do import. Let's see here. Okay, Dart math, and we'll put as math right over here. So now that error is gone, let's go ahead and do a hot reload, which is just a reminder, the lightning right over here. There you go. That looks closer to Jaina's design. So let me go ahead and also rotate the container. So that way it's going to be tilted 45 degrees. All right. Do Option Enter, or on Windows Alt Enter. Wrap with widget. Let's do the same thing. Transform.rotate. And let's go ahead and copy and paste what we have over here. And let me also go ahead and add the comma here. And put that property right here. There you go. So now we have that tilted dice. And also, since the dice in the design is a little bit smaller, let me go ahead and change the height. The height is 80.4. And then the width is also going to be 80.4. There you go. All right, much better. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the other part of the design. All right, so right over here. So we're gonna add the how many dice would you like to roll design. Let's go ahead and go down here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a widget called size box. And what this does is just going to create extra space for us in between the widgets. So the height will be 52. And let me go ahead and add the text widget. And then do how many dice would you like to roll? Go, and let's go ahead and do hot reload. There you go. So we have the text here, but it's not quite similar to the design. So let me go ahead and change the style property of the text widget. Style, text style. Okay. Oh, actually, since I've already defined this one, let me go ahead and show you in constant.dart. So here is the text style that we will be using to change the style of this text widget. As you can see, we have the font family, it's Poppins. It's what we defined in the configuration file, which is pubspec.yaml. The font weight would be almost bold and the color will be light blue. So let's go ahead and copy this variable or constant and just paste it here. Let's see. There you go. We're getting closer. Let me just go ahead and change the alignment for that because in Jana's design, the text is center instead of to the left. Let's do text align, if I can spell, dot center. There you go. So far, we're almost complete with the homepage. And another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is a property or also a widget called padding. And let me go ahead and insert that padding right over here. So size box and padding can be used alternatively. It depends on how you would use it. And let me go ahead and change this to 2. There you go, much better. Okay, so the next thing in the design that we're going to build is called a drop-down menu. And since we're a little bit pressed on time, let me just go ahead and copy the code that I've already prepared. Let me just go ahead and find it. Okay, so let's go. All right, so I've copied it and let me go ahead and paste it right over here. All right, so we see that we have a couple of errors here. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to comment this out for now. Let me go ahead and transfer this to the next line. There you go. All right. So let's see. The errors we have is that there is no defined drop-down value. This is a variable that I made. So let me go ahead and remake this in the demo. So let me go ahead and go up here. And this will be a type integer. And let's make it into 1. There you go. Okay, so we have one more error. This is the 2 rolling dice. Do we have that imported? No. Okay. So this error right here means that there is no way of the program in getting to the file called, or the class called 2 rolling dice, which is in this file right over here. So what we're going to do, if we want access to this page, we're going to need to import that right here. So let me go ahead and do import 2 rolling dice.dart. And so now when we do a hot reload or command save, it won't give us that error. And then we see that the drop-down menu has appeared right over here. Okay. So unfortunately, because of my skill level so far with Flutter, I was not able to edit the look of the drop-down menu. So that's going to be a common occurrence between the developer and the designer. Sometimes the developer just doesn't have that much experience with some of the aspects of what the designer wants, and that's okay. so let's go ahead and move to the page called 2 rolling dice. So let me go ahead and press 2 right over here. And let's go ahead and move to the 2 rolling dice dot. All right, so far, this is what our page looks like. It's going to start out ugly, but as you code up more of the user interface elements, it will look similar to the design that your designer has made. All right, so let's go ahead and explore this file. So this file is also going to be a stateful widget. And we see that we already have a scaffold, a column, because we want to lay out these widgets vertically. Okay, and then we also have a text called let's roll. All right, so let's go ahead and transfer those dice from home page to this page. And since us coders were lazy, so what we're gonna do, we're just going to copy and paste the whole code for the dice. All right, so let's go ahead and do transform rotate to here. Copied it, and let me go ahead and paste it below the let's roll. Or actually, let's do it below size box. All right, so let me do the hot reload. We see that the dice is here. And in Jaina's design, this is not supposed to be tilted, and it's also supposed to be bigger. So let me go ahead and remove this parent widget right here. And how you remove that is the same way as you wrap the widget. What you're going to do, you're going to press Alt, Enter, or Option Enter for Mac, and just do remove this widget. Let's do Command Save. There you go. Much better. And let's go ahead and edit the height and width of this, because this is supposed to be a little bit bigger. 18.6, and we have 118.6 again. All right, there you go. And since we have 2 dice, let's go ahead and copy and paste what we have here. And actually, what we're gonna do, since we don't have a way to the layout currently is going to be column, let's wrap this in a row widget. And this will arrange the 2 widgets from left to right. Widget, and let's add the other dice code below the other one. Let's do Command Save. Right. So we have the 2 dice now. We're getting a little bit closer to what Jaina has designed for us. Let's see here. Okay. So let's go ahead and have this a little bit cleaner, not too close to each other. Let's change the row property to have them space evenly. So what we're gonna do, main axis alignment. Main axis alignment, and let's do space evenly. Do Command Save, and we see that they're now centered and they have good space, good enough space between those 2 dice. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to creating the button down here. So again, unfortunately, because of my current skill level with Flutter, I'm not very familiar with Flutter animations. So I will not be able to implement the animation that Jaina did, where the dice is tilted, and after it has a result, it will tilt back to the straight line and show the result for us. But what my plan is we're just gonna make the dice bounce. So let's go ahead and create the button for that. Okay, so let's start with a text widget. And we're gonna have roll, all capital letters. Let's do save. All right, and then let's go ahead and wrap this in a container. Okay, let's see here. So decoration, we'll change the whole color to be a dark blue. So box decoration, color will be a dark blue color. And since the edges will be rounded, similar to the dice, we're gonna do border radius and do border radius dot circular. And we'll make the radius to 40. And let's go ahead and add the comma right here, then save. All right, so this is too small. We can't really see roll. So let's go ahead and change the style property of the text widget. Style, so text style will be, right, so we see that from Jana's design that the letter spacing will be 4.8, and the color will be the yellow color. Let's do K yellow, and font weight would be bold. So let's do font weight dot bold, and then the font size will be 32. Then let's do command save. There you go. And then let me go ahead and change the container right over here. Container, okay, the width is going to be 250, and the height will be 60. There you go. Okay, so we're almost there. We just need to have this roll text to be in the middle of the button. So let's go ahead and wrap this whole text widget right here. We'll go ahead and add a comma into the center widget. So let's do the option return or alt return, enter. Let's go ahead and wrap this with the center, and let's do command save. There you go. So now we have the roll. But as I'm clicking it, it's not doing anything so far, and that's because, you know, we have not implemented the functionality yet. So what we're going to do, we're going to wrap this whole container with a widget called the gesture detector. And as the name states, it detects the gesture on the device. So let's do an on tap. And you also see here that there are a bunch of functionalities that you can do with gesture detector. But today we're going to do on tap. And then it's going to take in an empty function for now. All right, so let me go ahead and make a function that will make our dice spaces be randomized. So let me go ahead and create a void function. That's because it's not returning anything. Name it roll dice. There you go. Okay, so as I mentioned in the previous project, we're going to do a set state. And just to remind you, a set state, it's going to detect any changes on the screen. And if it does, it will destroy that widget and completely rebuild it again to show you that update. So since we're going to change the faces of the dice, let me also go ahead and create two integer variables. Let's name one as a left dice number. Let's set that to 1 for now, and let's do a right dice number. And let's set this to 2. All right. So in this set state, what we're going to do is we're going to randomize those numbers between 1 to 6. So let me go ahead and copy this. This is how you randomize numbers in Flutter. At least this is how I learned. Do random.nextInt, and let's give it a range, and this range is excluded. So let's go ahead and do +1. And let's do the same for the right dice number. There we go. All right. So whenever we press on this roll button, it's not implemented yet. Hold on. Let me go ahead and copy this. Let me go back here, and let me put that down here and add a semicolon. There you go. So whenever we roll the dice or we click this roll button right here, nothing is changing. That's because we haven't done a string interpolation for these two strings right over here. So let me go ahead and do that. So the way you can do string interpolation, just to remind you, for going to be a $sign and then the variable name. So for this one, it's going to be a left dice number. And then for this one, it's going to be the right dice number. So let's go ahead and click the roll button again. And as you can see, we are able to randomize the pieces of these dice. But as I said earlier, we're going to want to do a small animation. We're going to have the dice bounce up and down. So what we can do is go up here in this container. Actually, let me go ahead and wrap this whole row inside a container. Okay, there you go. And some of the widgets that Flutter has its own version, animated version. So let's go ahead and change this to an animated container. Let's do command save. Oh no, we have an error. That's because we don't have a property called duration. So what duration does is that it takes in the time, the amount of time it will go from point A to point B. So with our plan, what we're going to do is we're going to have the container bounce up and then go back down. So that process should take 80 milliseconds. At least that's our plan. 80, then let's go ahead and command save and look, it's back. The error is gone. All right. So what we're going to animate is the padding property. This will give us that that bouncing effect. So let me go ahead and do the padding property. Edge insets only. That's because we're only modifying one property. Let's do bottom. And for now, we'll go ahead and do it to 0. Excuse me. And let's go ahead and create the variable for it because that's the one we're going to change. Let me go up here and make a, oh, actually, this this property right here, as you can see, this will take in a type double. So our variable should be the same. Do dice bottom padding, and let's make this equal to 0 for now. Let me go ahead and copy this and put it down here and save. And let's go ahead and also add a on end property. And what it's going to do is that at the end of the animation, we're going to do another set state, and we want this padding to go back to its original position. There we go. And let's also implement the bouncing effect. So whenever we click on this roll dice button, we're going to change the padding of the container. So let's go ahead and do dice bottom padding, make it equal to 100, for example. There you go. So now that I've compiled it or built it again, let's go ahead and click roll. Oh, okay, so this is not the effect that we wanted. So what I'm going to do to fix that, I'm going to wrap this whole animated container into what you call an expanded widget. Expanded, and what the expanded does is that it will take the remaining available space within the container. All right. So let me do save. And whenever we click on this roll button, you see that we now have that bouncing effect. All right, and one more thing. Let's go ahead and add a button right here that will take us back to the home page. As of right now, we can't do going back to the home page. Actually, the only way is doing a hot restart. And as I mentioned earlier, what a hot restart does is that it will destroy your app and completely rebuild it from the beginning. And I'll show you right here. See, it takes us back to the home page. Let's go back to the dice page. And let's go ahead and add a button where we can actually do that. There you go. All right, so now we have two buttons. Let's change the text in here to say, go back. And as what Olivia said earlier in her presentation, you want the style of the text to be consistent. That's why I made this all capitalized too. Okay, so if we press go back, it still has the same functionality as roll. So let's go ahead and change that. Okay, here we go. So a way to go back to the previous page is this line of code right over here. So let's do navigator dot pop. If you're familiar with stack, for example, with C++, you should be familiar with the pop function or property. The context and semicolon. There you go. So just to visualize this, we have two pages. We have the home page and then we have the dice page. And since they're both in a stack together, whenever we do the navigator.pop, what it's going to do is just going to pop off that dice page and then it will show us the home page. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that. Whenever we click go back, it takes us back to the home screen. Right, so that's all I have for the demo. Hopefully this was informative and hopefully it was easy to digest and was not too overwhelming. Flutter takes a little bit of time to learn, but once you get used to it, once you get more experience creating your apps, it's going to get easier to develop the applications with Flutter. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask them now.
Yeah, so we already have one question.
Mhm.
Do you recommend Mac or Windows for Flutter?
It doesn't really matter. If the only thing with Windows is that you don't have access to Xcode, so you are not able to run the simulator on an iOS device. But like I said, it doesn't matter which one you use. Flutter works great for both. The only, I guess, advantage with Mac is that you have access to an Android simulator and an iOS simulator. I hope that answers your question.
Next, we have another question. It's not Flutter, but it's, will we have access to the slide deck? And the answer to that is yes. And the workshop is also being recorded.
Mary, could you stop sharing your screen really quick?
Yeah. There you go.
And if there aren't any more questions, we can go ahead and end the workshop. I would like to thank Mary, Jana, and Olivia for hosting this amazing workshop. And be sure to check out ADO's Discord. We meet weekly on Wednesdays, and this semester we have started creating an app to map out Discovery Park for students using Flutter. Thank y'all.